Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm here with Aaron Ellis from nostressnow.com. And yeah, you can go to his website and learn some more about his stuff. But I'm going to let the man speak for himself. So I'm just going to introduce Aaron. Aaron, brother, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to have you here. I've checked out a bunch of your videos on YouTube. I find them very authentic and real and compassionate and straight up helpful, useful, functional. I'm sure a lot of other people do too. But rather than me go on about it, I would love for you to please tell us a little bit about yourself and your story.
Mate, well, thank you for having me on here. It's been great meeting you over the last couple of weeks, and the conversations we've had have been very enlightening. I I came across you because I'm an internal martial artist myself, and when I started to see the discussions that you were talking about, the deeper subjects of and aspects of martial arts, that really sparked my interest. So, a little bit about me is I've been into the martial arts world for about 30 years now, and I started off doing a little bit of taekwondo at school, and I loved the art, and then I started loved the martial arts movies, and then it actually started one day where I got my butt kicked at a train station, and I thought I really might learn something with a little bit more clout, and I started to learn Muay Thai. So I got into the Muay Thai arts, and during this time of of growing into the martial arts and learning Muay Thai, I also sort of had a dual path of learning about internal aspects of the mind and interested in supernatural and esoteric things, meditation. So they sort of they went hand in hand to me when I started to look at you know, the arts of Thailand and how it goes with Buddhism and things like that. And so it was really close to my heart. And the truth is, though, I started the martial arts for self-defense because I was a smaller boy. I had lacking confidence. So I really felt like I needed to grow myself physically and mentally because it wasn't that I got pushed, beaten up or anything, but I felt very insignificant. So my goal was to build myself up physically and mentally and just to be a stronger person. So really I dived into the martial arts and the world of kickboxing and Muay Thai, and I went quite well. I ended up having 7 fights. My first 7 fights, I all won them. I achieved a Queensland title and then an Australian title. And then I had a little bit of a break, and unfortunately my trainer's mother had some sickness, and we stopped training for a while. And then it was during this time of breaking from my training where I started to look at other arts. And I say that to people that I did a bit of martial arts shopping. I looked at Tong Long, I looked at Wing Chun, and when I say I looked at them, I didn't just read a book. I read books, I went to some classes, and I looked at what they were doing, and a lot of them I could see this magical effectiveness that I could see that was come through the movies and things that if you were good at this, you could be really good. But at the time when I was studying it, I already spent 10 years of Muay Thai, and I was like, am I prepared to spend another 5 years or so just mastering the basics of another art? So then over this time of kickboxing, I actually became involved in Russian kettlebells through the strength training, and the Russian kettlebells led me to the Russian martial art called Sistema. And then when I started to see Sistema and the way that it was portrayed and practiced, I sort of thought, well, this sort of looks very much like Kung Fu, Aikido, but it's spontaneous. It doesn't seem to have any forms. And this is what really sparked me, because then I looked into Sistema and realized that I had the basics in my martial arts. All I needed to learn was these principles now. And the principles of Sistema are breathing, to be relaxed but not floppy, to have a good form or structure, and to be moving constantly. And when I started applying these principles, I realized that I didn't need to go in and learn these forms, and the forms were secondary to martial arts. And for me, I realized that the forms may have been incorporated in times where there was lack of war, there was lack of fighting. So they would just practice their moves, which over time became practices, kata, etc. But the katas and the moves weren't actually the fighting style. And you can practice kata, but it doesn't mean you can actually defend yourself or naturally be able to integrate those movements into a natural way. So then practicing Systema, I got this level of relaxation because through kettlebells, I've been focusing on tension, strength, and the ability to create as much tension as you can in the muscle while doing an exercise for low repetitions, and then loosening the muscle, and you get a tremendous amount of power. But then I was not converting that power correctly. Then through Systema and through relaxation, and then looking at other arts such as Qigong and Fa Jing, we realized that the power actually comes through muscular, it's the muscle, but it's also what's called the fascia, which I had no idea of. So the whole time that I'd been doing kettlebells and I'd been thinking I'd just been building up my muscles, yet the fact that I really hadn't increased any weight, but I was a lot stronger than my peers, a lot stronger than everyone else. Little did I realize that I'd been building up this fascia. So the fascia was there, but I didn't know how to use it. So coming back to Systema again, and with this breathing and relaxation, started to get in touch with the first level of breathing and working with the body for me it's called contrast breathing, where we lay down on the ground, and as we breathe, we'd be breathing in, but we're imagining we're breathing from the toes, in through the foot, up to the leg, and then exhaling and then relaxing all the muscles all the way out. And we do that to each individual muscle on the body. And then that starts to allow you start to feel the difference between that tension and relaxation. And that's when the light bulb hit me, that all of a sudden I realized that if I had chopped off my arm and I swung it at someone and it was a zombie arm, it's going to be very heavy and it's going to knock someone out. But the way that I was punching in Muay Thai, clenching my fist, preparing for this power, I'd actually loaded up my muscles and was creating an anti-spring, which was stopping me actually holding the weight of my arm, preventing it from releasing its weight or its power. So through Systema and these breathing exercises, we started to realize that there was no need for this squeezing here, and it was just that relaxation that started to do the work. And through that relaxation, that's where my whole world started to open up, through understanding the tension in the body, that when you start to release the tension in the body, the mind will start to relax. And if you can relax the mind, the body will start to relax. So there's a twofold thing here. We have some people that have clarity in the mind, but tension in the body, or we have people that have tension in the body, clarity in the mind, or vice versa. So by relaxing the body, we can relax the mind. By relaxing the mind, we can relax the body. And working with these two in conjunction, I was able to find that I got a lot of self-progress in not only my martial arts ability, but my self-control and ability to be able to put intention to your movements with the martial arts, if that makes sense. So when people throw a punch, they often just throw a punch and the intention is, I'm going to throw another punch after that. And in result, it can be just this patter, 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 lots of punches. Where if you can, even though these punches might be quick, if you can put a certain amount of intention or relaxation, heaviness, whatever you want to call it, or in your imagination, it allows that power to penetrate. And when that power penetrates, it becomes what some people would say, oh my God, it's mystical. Where did you get that power from? But in reality, if I held a hammer and I relax and I go boom, it's exactly the same power. But we're not using that power in the way that we should. Does that make sense?
So yeah, I was upstairs and I was standing in front of the fridge, I should say, and I'm like going. So I put my engagement. I grabbed the top of the fridge and I engaged my muscles. It's like, yeah, I can feel the weight of that, right? And I'm pushing it and going, okay, that requires that amount of muscle strength. And then I just relax into the fascia, and then I just, like, my body's like a big elastic band. Then I just start leaning into the fridge, and I don't come right up close to me, because there's still that elasticity, and the fridge just moves by itself. I'm not even feeling the muscles contract. And so this idea of moving from the muscle tension into the fascia tension is the first bridge to working with intrinsic energies, because, you know, just like when we study anything to do with, say, out-of-body experiences, or deep meditative trance, you've got to shut the body off. You know, that's why we have float tanks. That's why we have zero gravity chairs. We need to quieten the body noise down so that doesn't capture the awareness, because that's what you might call the quote unquote loudest part of the experience. Is the noise from the physiology. And that's why, you know, some people won't eat before they go and do their sit, because the digestive processes can interrupt meditation as well. And obviously, if you're eating food that gives you a tummy rumble and a sore tummy, and that's not going to help you. So yeah, you know, when you're talking about, you know, quietening the mind and quietening the body, I mean, these are just you know, it's funny because I hear these things from, like, you know, you've got, say, you've got all these gurus around the net, right? And they've got, you know, there's one guy talking about memory. There's one guy talking about personal power. There's one guy talking about visualization. There's another guy talking about exercise. Another guy talking about this. Another lady talking about that. And they're all talking about parts of it. But it's like, you know, we've been talking about this Franz Barden book, Initiation into Hermetics, alongside the Mark Rasmus material, which is essentially the you know, a modernization of the material, and how essentially the book in its most simplest sort of nutshell form is basically exercises, daily exercises for the three bodies. So you're getting an even workout rather than just becoming strong here and strong here. You know, it's like an all over sort of approach. And what I've discovered in my own practices is that when I've started going, oh, I'm already doing that. So if I write out all the Barden stuff, mainly the first 5 or 6 exercises, I go, oh yeah, I'm already doing that. Tick, 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 tick. But I'm not doing that, and that. And it's like, why did I not think of doing that? You know, like you sometimes go, how did I not think of that? Right. But finding this approach where you're absolutely right, where people can do extraordinary things. And it's like, well, there's a way that this chap I caught up with told me. He says, basically, if you, this is how he explained, I've got my whiteboard here, so I don't know if this is any use to anyone, but basically, if you're down here and you're wanting to get up here, right, and that's your outer body experience, right, and you do this, there's a chain of causation that you do to get there. You do these things to get to that outer body experience. Whereas, say, when you've got a complete practice, what you're doing is that you're actually building foundations where what's here can be here as well, but instead of it being top heavy, where it's a bit hit and miss, you've got the solid foundations which activate and exercise the various muscles that support the various muscles that support the various muscles. And so whatever this ends up being, you're not on this kind of top heavy thing. You've got this solid foundation to work with. And I found that quite interesting, because when you look at all the exercises for meditation, whether it's single point or expanding mental space or mind blank, I find these in various materials and some of the self-hypnosis stuff too as being important skill sets. Mainly in that book we were talking about, the ESP book by Richard Allen Miller. I found those in there. But yeah, you know, anyway, I'm sort of wandering off here, but I just want to say, you know, when you're talking about, you know, how things tie back, you go back through the literature, the big bibliographies, and you find the source material. And it's like going, once you get all those religious texts and those things, you start taking off the dressings and the cultural sort of additions. And it's like going, on this side of the world, they're doing this particular practice, chanting, dry bathing, cold showers, or, you know, single point meditation. And over on this side of the world, they do the same thing. They just do it kind of different, but it's essentially the same principles here. And, you know, we hear a lot about the same, you know, people were able to achieve similar kinds of incredible feats, even though they, you know, it's like the pyramids in Egypt versus the pyramids in South America. They look different, but essentially they're both building these incredible freaking pyramids. You know, how do they do it? You know, and these types of things. But, you know, back to what we're talking about, you know, exploring human potential. It's like you know, you've been doing this for a while, bro. You know, like, you know, you've been doing martial arts and then you went looking. And I mean, I'm about sort of only about 8 years into this. And I have to say, there's so much material to look at. And I find that it ends up becoming quite overwhelming. At some point, and please comment on anything I've just mentioned here, but at some point, did you find that you had to dial back the incoming information flow at all?
It wasn't the fact that you need to dial back the information. You need to actually put into practice some of the information that you've actually come across, because you tend to go deeper and deeper into the information. And then, like Franz Barden says, you can read this book and you can go to these exercises, but unless you've mastered the first part, you don't tend to get that deeper understanding. So for me, it wasn't some things I would find harder than others, but then I would find a certain thing that worked for me. For example, when I discovered Zhan Zhuan, that was working the energy body for me, and a learning how to root to the earth and how to adjust the center of gravity. So that for me was my path to learning structure, but other people might have a different path. But what I believe is that there's two parts of it, as we said before. There's that mental part and there's the physical part. And often we're out of balance. There's a lot of spirituality and a lot of seeking in today's world. People are seeking more and we want more. And often the standard religious practices aren't giving people what they want, because they want real spiritual experience, not just reading anymore. And people say, well, I don't understand, because this religion says there's this God and this religion says this God, and how do I put it together? And I just say that if we could imagine that there were people in the past that reached, that became spiritual adepts, they became masters of their own consciousness. They spoke a certain language. They lived in a particular area. They had certain customs. And the way that they described their experience and the way they did it was in their language, in their way. So Shakyamuni Buddha, he was in India. He described his way. He was Indian. Then we had a Jewish man, Jesus, Yeshua, who had it his way. But there were different languages. But when we look at it, what were they all seeking? They were seeking the highest spiritual consciousness within themselves. And they all called it by different names, but it was the same thing. So that's when I realized that whatever your aspect of God or the creator is in your own belief. But we all have that aspect of whatever religion, race, color, to actually raise our own consciousness and find out what this ideal God or universal consciousness is. And coming back to the physical and mental parts, we know back into when Dharmo went to the Shaolin Temple and they were all meditating there, and they were good meditators, but they were weak and sickly. So then Dharmo brought out the Yi Jin Jing exercises to make them strong, to say if your body was strong, you'd be able to meditate longer. And so the physical aspects and the mental work together. And then sometimes we'll get people that are just focusing on that mental aspects, and you'll find that the physical start to deplete. Or in today's world, we have a lot of men who they want to build their confidence, so they go to the gym and they build an awesome body. They're strong. They're going to the gym, but then something in life hits them hard, and they're going, "What's going on? I'm this fit, strong guy, but this is crushing me," and they don't realize it's because they haven't developed that other part, that mental side. So I believe that in a human consciousness, not only do we need to do physical work to keep our bodies active, and I don't mean as in building up and being physically bulky and strong, but strong enough that we can live a long time, that we can live healthy and free. And that's going to give us extra time to practice mentally, because we have that balance.
Yeah, well said. We can see, it's like there's a classic meme, don't miss leg day. You got this guy, he's big and bulky, he's got these little cricket wicket legs, and he's this huge Adonis, whatever. And it's the same too, yeah, with this whole mental, physical approach as well. And for me, that's where the Barden material became extra interesting, because it brings in this middle dantian, or this emotional body. And you know, how that plays into, especially if you're on a mystical path. And you're absolutely right. You know, man, you cover quite a bit of stuff there, but I'm looking around going, man, there's lots of people doing religious / spiritual things, but nobody's having experiences as far as I know. They've all kind of been,
Yep.
they've been sold a bill of goods here, the exoteric of
Yep.
just like show up and do the thing. And I'm like, personally for myself, I'm like going, well, I don't want to believe. My faith comes from conviction, not from just believing
Right.
stuff. I mean, I kind of see that one of the reasons why we're in such a problematic state in the world right now is because people just believe stuff. You know, they don't test it out,
Yep.
and they don't, you know, and this is the problem of like we have of this thing where, yeah, basically you just have people just getting ready to go, okay, what's the next thing that I'm supposed to do or believe, or you
Yep.
know, they're just just waiting to be fed this thing. But when it comes to this personal, direct, mystical experience where we can have continuous experiences, and we've got 2 feet and solidly in the physical, one in the physical world and one of the in the greater reality. You know, you've got these 2 things where you can function in the real world. I think this is a trap for a lot of, I mean, I've got a lot of friends who are in various parts of the whether they're the truth and freedom communities or whether in the UFO or the spiritual communities.
Yep.
And you know, something I've struggled with myself is like, um you know, how do you bring this stuff down to earth so that you can share it with people? Like I tried doing it with Reiki for many years, and I had great success being an energy healer with Reiki. Well, regardless, I just used Reiki, right? But I was thinking, well,
Yep.
Reiki's a good word to use because it's reasonably well known in the public, well enough. That should be an easy shoe-in. And then I just sort of started feeling, well, you know, he was a guy who went up a hill, had an experience, came down, built a system on top of existing systems that was time and location appropriate for the community he was living in. And so when we
Yep.
start bringing in these other systems and people are just like, huh, that doesn't make any sense to me. I have no point of reference. That sounds too Eastern and mystical. I mean, don't get me wrong. I live in it's not it used to be a lot more so, but New Zealand's was a highly Christian country. It still
Yep.
is. But, you know, like, you bring up the word Reiki and that, and, you know, a lot of people go, you know, and, but I'm also like going, man, you know, uh, some of these things, and you mentioned it so well, is like, in some ways, I wonder if for me anyway, if I, you know, sometimes I wonder if I'm hiding behind something because I've got something that's really cool and I'm going to use the name, the Reiki word, but it's also like going, if I'm really paying attention to what's going on in my community, I would be wanting to use language that would be far more digestible and accessible. But when you start getting into things like intrinsic energies and stuff, that's still too wild for some people, I think.
Yep.
Uh, I forgive me, brother, I do wander off on large tangents here.
Well, this is good though. That this brings us back to like the fact of we talk about this intangible energy that we feel. So when if we, people start to put their hands together, and generally most people can start to feel that magnetic force or that chi ball that we've often seen, and we think, what is that? Well, when we can go back to what is the human body? The human body is 70% water and chemical electrical energy. We're literally mini batteries. And these batteries that when we create, we can actually increase the voltage of that battery through our quantum computer. Through our intention, we can start to increase we won't say that it's anything supernatural. We could say that the more of these neurotransmitters and chemicals between the synapses of the nerves, they start to create that electrical energy. And as we know, electricity is anomalous to magnetism, because if we wrap a coil and then we put an electrical current through it, it becomes an electromagnet. And the electromagnets or magnetic fields extend beyond the radius of the object.
Mm.
So we can start to think now that this chemical electrical energy that we're creating in our hands just through movement, which is genuine, true, is there a possibility that through this intention, we're creating more electricity and intrinsically creating a magnetic field, which can then interact with the outside world? That is where we're starting to play. And this is where theory becomes, it has to be experimental, because it doesn't matter how much I explain to you and say, hey, this is what can happen, unless you start to experience these things and through your mind, it's just going to be just what it is, what you believe it to be. Nervous energy, that's all it is. But when we can start to think of outside that box of putting electricity and magnetism together and starting to think of, wow, we have these crazy little things that happen between humans where I'll think about a friend and then the phone will ring and I'll answer. What's that coming from? These thoughts transference. So there is something that we humans know that hasn't been measured or tested yet, but we know it exists. And that's the area that I think us humans need to start playing in more and start working with, and not realizing that it's not physical, it's not something that's tangible that I can put in my hand, but it's mental. And the mental becomes the physical. And that becomes in everything. As simple as that, I say to myself, gee, I wouldn't mind a cup of coffee. And I'll manifest that by getting up and making a cup of coffee. It's not magical. It was my thought that created it. I think to myself, I want to be successful. My thoughts will create, and then I'll start to do things to make myself successful. It wasn't magic, but the thought, or that force of the thought, was what started this movement.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful because, as you think, so you feel and so you act. And when those three states are in alignment, that's when you're going to get your best result. And one thing I really love about how we connected was through Richard Allen Miller's stuff, because the on his book, the one thing that really stood out for me was on his Power Tools book was Towards the Evolution of Consciousness. That's it. Maybe we can jump a little higher. Maybe they can get, run that 100 meters just a little bit faster and these types of things. But it's like, well, maybe to an extent that our physicality, the human body, has reached some of its potential. If we just look at the mainstream conversation, we might be able to just squeeze a little bit more out of it this way or that way. But essentially, when we look at these texts and we see one of the common underlying principles is that the universe is mind, it's like, well, just because infrared light we couldn't measure it didn't mean it didn't exist. Just because we couldn't see radiation didn't mean it didn't exist. Just because they haven't got an instrument that can measure this feeling that we can feel with our fascia or through our nerve fibers doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And you're absolutely right. It's like when we start exploring this, because I also understand that the group consciousness, the community mind, has a big part to play on what we're allowed to actually do. Like if we have a deep subconscious program that says, that this isn't okay, then we actually have to go through a process. If we've grown up with that, then we might have that hardwired into us, and that can take time and that's why we have processes like self-hypnosis and ways of suggesting things out and breaking patterns and things. Because essentially, and somebody said this in a great way, and they said humans are akin to computers, and that you put something in, it processes it, then you have output, rather than because I hear some comments like, oh, it's human nature to be this or human nature to be that, and I'm like going, well, I kind of think of it more like, I think human nature is potential. Really, it's what could we do, rather than giving it a label of, humans are greedy by nature and humans are this by nature. I'm like going, well, actually, that's not my experience. When people get exposed to good information and good dietary requirements and things like that, they can spin on a dime just like that and turn their life around and do better things. But anyway, but this idea of exploring these potentials, because I have to say, I'm looking around. I used to be a guitar teacher. I used to have a really fun job, play musician, get up on stage, and I'm looking around going, this isn't really helping as much as I thought it might have. Where's the real deal here, and so that's kind of what led me looking. And when I got into energy healing, I'm like, wow, people are getting results more significantly, statistically more beneficial outcomes than, say, placebo and these types of things. And I thought, wow, this is something really, really worth pursuing here. And and obviously you've come across hypnotherapy, brother, and many other tools as well. And I'd love to hear about some of the successes that you've had, some of the things that really grabbed your attention, especially when you first started working with people and noticing these great results. And anything you want to share, man.
Okay, so I'll first start with success, or a little bit of success and failure. So, as I said earlier, I'd been involved in just doing the street hypnosis things of, putting people into mini trances, getting their hands stuck on tables and things like that. And then I actually went through a significant trial in my life where my son was diagnosed with leukemia when he was 13 years old. And my partner and I went through the chemotherapy with him, and he's now recovered and he's great. But during that time, that placed a lot of pressure on my partner and I, and we ended up separating. And during that time of separation, I felt lost. I was like, what do I do? So I thought to myself, I really want to learn hypnotherapy, and I want to learn it in a clinical setting now, actually how to really help people, and not just this tricks of the mind and things like that. So I studied and actually became a clinical hypnotherapist. But the way that I was taught is generally relaxing a person, and then we give them suggestions, we find out, and in the end, it's a script, Phil. It's, you come to me and you say, Aaron, I'm suffering from anxiety. And I would pull out my anxiety script and I would go, you're feeling relaxed now, and we put all these suggestions in, and hopefully you feel good and you feel confident. And I found that 50% of the time that literally me just reading a script, getting people into this calm, relaxed frame of mind was working. And then 50% of the time, nothing was happening. And I'm going, what is going on? And that's when I came across the father of hypnosis, Milton Erickson. Do you know of him?
No, sorry, I don't.
So Milton Erickson was he was a psychotherapist, a psychiatrist, and he suffered from polio. And during his young years, through self-hypnosis himself, he learned to control his pain and became one of the most influential hypnotherapists on the planet. And through that, we've had NLP was developed through Bandler and Grinder. They actually studied Milton Erickson and learned and made a neuro-linguistic program from that. So the thing with Milton is Milton never ever used a script. People would just come in and he would talk to them. And then after an hour, they were in a trance and they would have profound outcomes. And what's happened over the years is, because Milton was so good at what he did, was other hypnotherapists said, well, this is how he made someone stop smoking. So they copied out what he said, made it into a script, and said, this is how you stop people smoking. And sometimes it would work and sometimes it wouldn't. And then I was lucky enough maybe about 18 months ago, I came across a gentleman called Scott Jansen. And he is an Australian, and he teaches hypnotherapists and coaches how to grow their business. And he started teaching a therapy called advanced conversational hypnosis. And this is something that I'd been trying to get into for a few years. I said that one of my mentors was Igor Letohosky, and I previously purchased his 37 DVD conversational hypnotherapy set, and just so overwhelming that I literally didn't implement it. So then I joined Scott's course, and in one day, these principles that this man taught me was the principles that Milton Erickson was using. The principles of curiosity, asking questions, not solving someone's problem, and just being a human being. And when I learned this, and then when I stopped solving people and going, oh, Phil's coming with anxiety, I better pull out my anxiety script. Instead, I realized that just by asking questions and asking specific questions that normally other people would never ask, it'll get you to deeply go within yourself to find the answers to your problems. And that's when the breakthrough started to happen for me. I previously would be working with someone for 6 weeks with anxiety. And I would go through, the first one was a general relaxation hypnosis. they'd feel better. Then they'd repeatedly listen to that every night. The next week, there'd be confidence and erasing worry. And over the 6-week process, someone would feel a lot better than themselves. But this was taking a long time. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to give this advanced conversational hypnosis a practice. So I asked some of my coach friends, I need some people with some real problems. And when I mean a real problem, I mean something that is genuinely holding you back, that you've tried to overcome, but hasn't worked. And it could be something like procrastinating with your business, or wanting to do a live stream. And every time you go to hit that live, you go, I can't do it. So I got these coaches on here, and with no previous knowledge at all, I didn't even know what the problem was. I would start with, so what's the problem? And from that question, in 45 minutes, I was getting people in open-eyed trances going, oh my God, I never looked at it like that before. Wow. Whoa. Oh my God. And I'd say, how are you feeling? And they'd be like, whoa. And then this is where I'd like to tap into or talk to you about this. Remember, we were talking about the emotional body before. I think the emotional body comes into this, and I've never linked it until now. There's a method of trance called the emotional trance method. So when someone is feeling an emotion, say we're talking about something and I'm saying you're feeling anxious and you're feeling at this particular time, and I'll get you to tap into that emotion, and you'll often find that it'll be somewhere in your body. It might be in the stomach, and they'll say it's a whirling feeling or something. And then I'll leave that, and we'll come back to a point where I'll say, when was the last time you felt fantastic? And they'll start to tell me, and they'll rattle off, and I'll say, where are you feeling that now? And they go, into trance. Have a think. I'm actually feeling it in my heart, or this warm feeling. And then all I'll do is get them to concentrate on that warm feeling. I don't know what that means. Did you do that feeling by yourself? Did you do it consciously? And they're like, no. I said, but it must mean something, right? And then they'll attribute some special meaning to that feeling. And that feeling and emotional breakthrough creates long-lasting change. And through this method, there's also, I'm not sure if you've heard through hypnotherapy, often people will say, we need to heal the inner child. We need to go back to that inner child to find out, do a regression. So once again, we pull out a regression script because Milton Erickson did a regression once, but he didn't plan it. He was just talking. And then as the person was talking, that person spontaneously regressed to a childhood memory. And they delved into that and was able to solve a problem. So what the hypnotherapist did, well, that must be the way to take someone back. So we did these scripts and we tried to take people back, and often it doesn't work. But the reason is because regression's spontaneous. Sometimes I'll ask a question and I'll say, when did this happen the first time? And really think about that. And then the person needs to stop. That conscious mind goes blank for a moment, like the moment between the lightning and the thunder, where you're waiting. And then all of a sudden something will pop out of that subconscious mind, because the conscious mind, we've taken that down. And that's when that memory might pop up. Wow, I can actually remember my father telling me that you're not good enough when I was 8. And they'll go, wow. And I say, what can you learn from this now? And they go, well, I didn't understand that when I was a child, but I understand that now, that it doesn't mean that it's my whole life. And because they have found the change, and because I just delved in and opened up this box to give the solution that you already knew, sometimes the solution can be profound, and it happens in 45 minutes. And when I'm saying profound, I'm saying people are going like, oh my God, I've had this issue for many years. I've been seeing therapists. How did you do this? And I say, I didn't do anything. All I did was allow you to go inside to find the solution yourself. And that's where what I call the advanced conversational hypnosis revolutionized my whole therapy, because I'm not working on the symptom anymore. I'm working on the core root problem, which only you know, or the client knows.
Yeah, and that's it, we live in this very kind of symptomatic kind of find a way to, throw bandages on things, and we're not dealing with the root causes.
Definitely.
And I started discovering this when I was in my early stages of doing the energy healing as well, is that, people would come in for something here, ouch, and then they would leave with this thing, maybe a bit less, but they would have an epiphany, something that had been really weighing them down. They're like, "Oh man, dude, I know it's not related, but because I have the table session, right? We can do healing sitting up, standing down, on the back of a horse, whatever you
Yep.
want, on the back of the boat." Well, I normally get them to lay down on the bed. A lot of them haven't. Been meditators at all. They haven't meditated, and so this is
Yep.
essentially like a stillness type session. And once they get really still, I'll say to them things like, is there anything in your life you would like to experience change in, or is there a piece of information that would allow you to be much more relaxed, or that would give you great relief? And when they're in a really relaxed state, they get off the table and maybe the sore thing has gone away or it's less, and that's still a focus,
Mhm.
but it's also like, man, this thing that I didn't know what to do with, I now know exactly what to do
Yeah.
with.
And the number one thing that what I do in my sessions and what you did in that session was allow that person to calm down that conscious chatter,
Mm,
that monkey mind, which doesn't allow us to have these epiphanies. Because often we have the epiphanies when we've heard of Einstein and Edison during their naps, was when they had these epiphanies of great realization. And it's those naps, or that time where that conscious mind was at a lull, that we're allowed to let those spontaneous revelations come through. And I think this relates to calming the mind, to being able to meditate, to being able to being in slight control of your thoughts and your thinking, not having to be in full control, but just being aware of these control of that it's there, and when it is running like a monkey and when it is calm, because those two extremes is when we can work with ourselves.
yeah, and there's an exercise called blanking or voiding the mind, and that is basically where you're just sitting there with a blank mind or focusing on the stillness. But what you're doing is, or even the first exercise, which is the letting the thoughts rise and fall away, essentially just watching there. You're just sitting there watching, and things you're allowing space for things to emerge, rather than focusing on the thing and following the things around and getting caught up in what those things do. You're just sort of like
Yep.
sitting there watching them. But what I found is that, and this was in the Richard Allen Miller book, ESP, Induction Through Forms of Self-Hypnosis. Essentially, his formula was, and sorry, this isn't really much of a spoiler because there's a lot of stuff to read in that book, but essentially, you focus on the question, and then you create the space, and then you wait for the answer to emerge. But
Exactly.
but if you've got a lot of internal noise, it's like you're trying to clean up the noise, the signal to noise ratio, so that you're getting pure signal and you're not getting all of the unhelpful, unuseful information. So the goal is that I know what I need to know. I know that I need to know inside. I know that I know, but it's like, well, sometimes I found having someone else to help kind of uh, help you find it is good, because
Yep.
even though you have it, sometimes you need to be shown that you have it to help you build a conviction and a faith in yourself that you do have the answer to everything. I mean, my first business card that I made when I started teaching mindfulness was, become your greatest teacher. And I didn't realize just how on the money that was. I thought I might have been a bit bold there, but it's ultimately like, you start sorting yourself out, you start noticing the changes appearing in the outside world.
Yep.
I've got plenty of teachers in my life, but they haven't really. They've given me they've shone a light here and they've shone a light there, and they've been really important in that. But essentially, I'm still the one that got me there, and so I think, you know, uh, we are all connected to this great reality in our own
Yep.
way. And like you said, sometimes the phone rings and it's a person you were just thinking about. There's access to layers of understanding that are accessible. And it's just about knowing how we do this. And by calming, the first thing we have to do is we have to clean up our mental process, because that is essentially, we are literally being bombarded by 40 to 60,000 thoughts a day. I don't know if the numbers have changed, whatever, but with all that going on, that little voice, that weak force, we're talking about dropping from the muscle contraction into the fascia, into the jing, or into the chi, whatever. I mean, that's essentially moving from the hard into the soft, into the softer, into almost like a wispy fluid that you have to be able to focus on. But you've got to be able to move your focus from the noisy down to the quiet to be able to focus on it, so you can do something with it. And if you've got like you said this just before as well, is like, there's a balance between your intention and your observing. If you observe, you can see more, but if you intend, then it takes your capacity for observing away a little bit. But Mark Rasmus talks about that, and that is you've got to find that sort of that sweet spot, so you can pay attention to something, fix your mind on it, and then you can also use your mind to intend to do something with it. So I'm probably getting a bit off track here, because this is probably more the stuff that you and I know about, but maybe the crowd, the audience doesn't. But essentially, being able to pay attention to something is really important, and being able to focus on it so that you can learn, you develop a capacity for understanding that you can only get from 20 minutes, that you can't get from spending 5 minutes with it, sort of thing. And so even though it may seem something very simple, it's amazing how when we go back and look at things, we discover new information, new data from different angles, and these types of things as well as we develop. And so by exercising all these different elements of our consciousness, we essentially build up more trajectories of being able to observe from different angles to get different information. And I found that that's been extremely handy, because I used to be like, oh, I'm going to go sit under a tree. Now it's like, oh man, I'm going to go sit under a tree, right? Because there's so much going on there now for me, because I have this heightened sense of awareness. Anyway.
Well, I'd like, from what you stepped on there and was saying of, we often have our attention that it's spread through, you could say, the whole pores of the body. Our attention or our consciousness is through our body. And when I was looking for esoteric spiritual experience and starting with meditation, the first type of meditation I came across was guided meditations of relaxing. And then to me, I was just doing another form of hypnosis, and it still got me relaxed. I felt great, but once again, there was no esoteric experience. And then what I realized through the practices of Saint Matt and following the path of the masters, which we can talk about another time, is the consciousness, or the soul, if you want to call it, the spirit, it permeates the whole body. And when someone's life force, or they are killed, that life force is removed from the pores of the body. It seems to come up through the throat. People often, they'll be gurgling if they're not dying in a good way, and then the consciousness tends to leave. Where if we start to consciously bring our attention to the third eye, or the pineal gland, or up above to the eyes, we start to get an enhanced state of awareness. So if you notice that when we're sitting down and we're really relaxed and we start to go to sleep, our consciousness starts to drop, and our consciousness will often start to drop to the throat. And that means that people will start to drop down, and they might even start to get a bit of a snore. Where with meditation, and true meditation, it's not about working on the breath. It's not about anything physical. It's about using your attention just to constantly bring that attention up here until your whole attention, like you were saying in our earlier conversation, is focused on this pinpoint of light, so that eventually the power of the consciousness within the body is now sitting in the pineal gland with attention like a blowtorch. And it's almost equivalent to dying while living, because if you can get to the point where you're sitting in an asana or a posture for long enough with no movement, you will lose all feeling of the lower extremities, and it starts to come up until about the heart. And The goal is to continually bring that up so that we can actually go through that soul state, that tisratil, that with they call it the third eye, that the barrier is as thin as a butterfly's wing. But we need to penetrate that. And when we start penetrating it long enough with our intention, we start to see interesting things, light, colors. And people say this could be our imagination, and it could be. It could also be neurochemicals within the brain. But whatever it is, and whatever that experience is, it is experiential. It's not just sitting there thinking, I'm relaxed. You get to this point where your consciousness is so far up here, and then it'll drift a bit, and it'll come back and it'll drift a bit. And then if you're lucky enough, you'll get 5 seconds or less of this state that becomes an experience that you know that there is something more. And it's not really expressible. It's not really explainable. And it's something you want to get back to each time. And I believe that's the state we're all seeking for, which often we, as what I call just the normal general people, we have fleeting moments of these through meditation because we don't have hours and hours to spend every day of focusing our mind. But even the small aspect of focusing our mind through mindfulness, meditation, one-pointed concentration, the one-pointed concentration builds up our power of consciousness, of our attention. And when we've built up our consciousness or attention in any way possible, whether that is focusing on a flame, focusing on a spot at top of the nose, we're allowing to get in control of our consciousness, not just our brain. And that's where that first part starts coming to self-control, because you'll realize that there's 2 parts of you. There is the part of you that is holding that concentration, and then there's the other part, which is the fleeting thoughts. And then you'll realize that you aren't the thoughts. You're something that is actually observing these thoughts. And that's when you realize that you're greater than what we are sitting right here talking.
Yeah, and with extended practice, I've found of just watching the thoughts rise and fall away, the quality of the thoughts. It's sort of like the mind starts to filter them, so the trivial things tend to not be so prevalent.
And you start to note, it's almost like you're noticing yourself, noticing the thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. And so, we're essentially, and this is, I think, is important too. I think umbrella terms like meditation, it's a bit of a loaded word. People think it's about relaxing or it's about chilling out, and it's like, yeah, well, those are the generally the initial byproducts, but essentially it's mental training. It involves things like, you're basically learning how to manage your thought processes so that they don't manage you. You're becoming the master of your environment rather than, and so those the first sort of, sets of exercises in the Barden book are essentially, actually the whole magical path is essentially inoculating yourself, starting on the earth plane, from your animal drives, from your emotional drives, and from your mental thought patterns, and then from the elements, and then you work your way, then you can start working your way through the solar system and so on. That's pretty way off in the distance. To start with, it's like we've got to it's essentially, forgive me for using these words, inoculating / immunizing yourself against environmental influences, so that you're essentially freeing the spirit, because otherwise the spirit is not the loudest until you make it the loudest. It's the very quiet voice, but the astral body is the loud one, and the physical body wants food, and the mental body's just got all these thoughts because of the advertising and these types of things. So we go through this process of cleaning them up. Then we can really get down to that little voice. That's the one that pops up when we're paying attention. We've got the ability to focus on one thing for a certain amount of time. And like you said, focusing on a small dot of light is one thing, and then recreating, say, a flame. Those are they're the same and different, because when you're getting onto more complex structures, then you're starting to create this essentially like an interface. Like you're building your visualization capabilities. And so when we talk about people who go to the gym, and then people who don't go to the gym, but just sit at home and think about going to the gym, for some reason they get a result. Although apparently it's only 50% of the actual workout. If you sit there and apparently pump iron, you'll get a 50% of the workout as if you went to the gym. And I heard someone say, well, the reason they only get 50% is because they're not very good at visualization. If they had more visualization skills or better visualization skills, they'd probably be looking like Schwarzenegger in no time, sort of thing. But yeah, I haven't actually personally put that one to the test, but I am aware of Arnold Palmer, the golf player, who used lucid dreaming to improve his golf swing. And he's not swinging the club in bed, is he? And so that whole conversation of what even is muscle memory it brings it in as well, because you can use lucid dreaming for many things. But
well, when in my Muay Thai days, I used to have some strange experiences because I used to go through having the fight before I'd had the fight, because I wanted to experience it as much as I could, so that when I got in that ring there, it wasn't like the first time I'd have felt it. So I would go through that feelings that I'd felt before, of the anxiety of the name being called out, and then you go into the ring, and then often I'd be there and I'd like to make it as real as possible. So I would imagine myself kicking and punching, yet receiving punches and taking them as well. And then sometimes my leg would twitch, my arm would twitch. And that's when we realize that the imagination or the mind doesn't understand what's real and what's imagined.
yeah, that's right. That's why you can do things in dreams and you can take gains from them, even though your body hasn't been moving. So yeah, brilliant. I mean, that's such a fascinating topic of conversation. I think, like I've done a lot of dream work personally, and it's really interesting. It's a lot of what I found is I don't know about yourself, but it can be quite a laborious task writing dreams out. But I've got to a point now where I've got a pretty good relationship. I've got good recall, and so some dreams want to be written down, and some of them are just like things that are being processed in the background. But there's this thing about, well, you've got how many hours do you need for rejuvenating delta wave sleep, your 3 or 4 sleep cycles where your body needs to basically shut down and be left alone, and your mind needs to be quiet. And then you get up at, say, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and you can do a meditation, and then you can start playing around with lucid dreams, out of body experience types things, and those last sleep cycles. Now, I can imagine, because your experience with self-hypnosis, ESP, and those types of things, self-hypnosis and NLP and hypnotherapy and things like that, have you noticed that since you started doing this practice professionally, that you noticed a lifting in the frequency or the intensity of your own personal experiences when you started doing this professionally at all?
I started to notice that I became more what I call an actor rather than a reactor. So often in life, we tend to come up experiences and we tend to just go to a default programming of, for example, if someone breaks glass, the default program might be, oh my God, I've just broken that glass and I'm annoyed with it. When you start to get this self-control or mild mastery over your thoughts, you start to act rather than to react. So I'll break that thing and I can start to feel the programming wanting to come up, like, gee, that was a pain in the ass that I broke that. But then I'll go, it's only a glass. I just clean it up and I move on. And that's when I start to realize that instead of just becoming a pawn and reacting to circumstances, we can actually choose how to act or how to react to them, rather than just unconsciously doing it. And then becoming more conscious of your actions and conscious of your reactions or the way you're responding to people, you can make positive changes in your life because you're just not in the same loop of responding the same way, where often we just get into these no modes or, yes modes, but we're not actually really thinking about why we're saying that no or yes.
Yeah, you bring up something so important there. I mean, any type of, I was talking to a friend of mine who's got no end of health issues, and they're telling me about how they're getting on the line to, we have WINS here, or the Work and Income New Zealand, or the Ministry of Social Development, basically ringing up the government asking for help. And he's on the phone and he's talking to like 3 different people every day, trying to sort this thing out. And he basically has to repeat his story every time. And so what's happening is over time, as I'm saying, bro, you're essentially reinforcing your
Yep.
your physical problem, your medical problems, by talking about them and saying, this is who I am, this is what my issues are, and you're saying it
Yep.
just about every day. And you're wondering why you're not getting any better. And I was thinking about this, going, because literally some people do spend that, like, regularly on the phone talking to people, going through the, I need to put you through to this person now, and you got to give them the whole
Yep.
story again and again and again. I mean, I can see how people can start to identify with their illnesses just through having to, I mean, they don't want to, but they have to talk about
Yep.
it a lot.
Yep.
And it becomes like an affirmation or a kind of a mantra. And I remember my Reiki teacher was telling me about, she was saying, look, you're going to get some people come in and they want the session, but they don't want the healing, so to speak. They're that,
Yep.
I my walking stick is part of my identity. I don't want that to go away. I don't
Yep.
want to be, I don't want to have that to change. But anyway, back to what you're saying, like this thing about reinforcing or saying things over and over to ourselves, whatever it is. It's we're reinforcing patterns and
Mm.
structures that are essentially working against us, and this is when we're not able to perform our best work, because we're actively feeding the beast that we're trying to fight as well.
Yep.
And have you got anything that you would offer to someone who's like, they're a bit indecisive in their life about something? Have you got any exercise or anything you could share with someone who may be, trying to break free of a pattern or something like this, apart from obviously getting in touch with you and organizing a
Yep.
strategy call?
Yep.
But
I'd often say to someone that you need to find out what you really want, because often people, they say they want things and they want things to change, but they're not actually sure of what it is. And when you understand that what you actually want, and like before, if I say that I am broke, I have a sore leg, I have a sore knee, and I start to repeat that long enough, it becomes my identity or my story. So we need to create our own story, write the new story, write the new chapters by affirming new things in our life. So if I'm suffering from self-doubt and I don't know what to do, and I keep saying, gee, I am in doubt, I will be in doubt, because beliefs become true to ourselves, because the reality that we think is our reality. So if we start to think that, okay, I'm doubting at the moment, but if this doubt was to subside, what things could I do? And we need to actually, once again, open up your subconscious mind and get rid of that conscious chatter. Because if you just say, I'm in doubt, what can I do? And you'll just go through that same loop again. Where if you start to think of, okay, I'm in doubt, but I need to actually some direction. What do I actually want? What am I doubting? Where is the cause of this doubt? And when did I decide that I was doubting myself? Because often we'll find that there was a decision somewhere that I said that I'm now broke, or I am sick. And then from that point, that was the decision that it all came from. So long story short, if someone's feeling that self-doubt and you're doubting yourself, first of all, realize that you've won, and you've got to the place today through so many trials, so many tribulations, that I'm sure that the problem that you're facing today, you've actually probably got through something worse before. And back then, you didn't think you could get through it. It was the end, but you did get through it. So realize that if you've done something that's hard before, and hard things make us stronger, and hard things make us realize the good. Because in this world of polarities, unfortunately, we have to have some negativity. We have to have some downtime to realize that there's so much happiness and joy in the world. But we can't focus on one side of that story. Start focusing on your wins. Start focusing and creating your own story of who you want to be, not who other people want you to be and how you should react, but how you truly want to be. And what is your authentic self? Are you being authentic? What is your authentic self? Some people might need to delve inside and find out that they've actually been hiding behind this fake external ego appearance for protection, for confidence, when really there's so much more in there. So for most people, And everybody out there, I say that nobody is broken. No one is broken. You're only broken if you tell yourself broken. But we've all got unlimited potential. And if you're in a state at the moment where you're stuck for a solution, just realize that there is a solution, but you've just got to look out of the box to find it. Because when you're stuck in the box, it's very hard to find a solution that's outside.
Oh, brilliant. That's great, man. Well, brother, we're coming up on the hour here, and I wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. And I want just you know, you just dropped some really good stuff there. These are the gems, that you've come across in your travels, and I think that a lot of people feel this way. I mean, I know I do as well. Is it's like, this landscape is getting increasingly difficult to navigate, and so people are waking up and then they're going, oh my gosh, like like I'm trying to find something to do with my life now that's meaningful. And I think part of that is that part of the reason why we have all these spiritual traditions is because people get to the point in their life where they're not satisfied by just the ho hum, and they're looking for something more. And part of that is, these spiritual traditions are the pathways is pretty much paved with purification, and we'll lose the piousness and the and that's sanctimonious, sort of like any connotations towards that, how that might refer back to purification. But it's like essentially removing what is not to discover what is. And I found that to be that's one thing I think people like Michael Tessarian would talk about, this apophatic methodology, where you're removing what is not to discover what is. And I found that to be good. Get that piece of paper out and just write down what, if I don't know what something is, I'll write down what it's not, and that is helpful too. But finding out the thing, I think that's the difficult thing, because, and it comes back to what you said, am I being authentic? Am I being authentic? And that's the one. How do you?
And how do we know we're being authentic? What are you worrying? Are you worrying about what other people are thinking of you? Because really, in general, and I say to my other coaches and therapist friends that when we're a therapist and coach, the one person that I can't focus on is me.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's all about you or the client. And when we send our emotions and we have this deep care for someone, just as a human being, not as a therapist, but as someone who deeply cares and wants to ask the questions to get to the deep root of the problem, magical things can happen.
Beautiful. Thank you. So much wonderful wisdom, and thank you for your time. I want to say to people, you want to check out Aaron. Where are we? You'll notice that there's a ticker along the bottom here, nostressnow.com. How else can people get in touch with you, Aaron?
They could also go to my Facebook profile, which is facebook.com nostressnow.
Perfect.
And they could also check out my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/complete strength.
Awesome. And I have to say, you have got so many great videos on there, and you're constantly pumping them up there. I'm a bit behind the 8 ball. I don't mind a little bit of competitiveness there, but it's great to see, the active content coming out regularly. It's very helpful, the stuff you share. So I fully encourage everyone to go and check out Aaron's YouTube. And this has been really great. And so we'll definitely catch up again, my brother. If I could get you to stick around for just 2 minutes after the broadcast. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this, and please keep watching. I have some more guests coming up, and should be good fun. All right.
Thanks,
All
Phil.
of it. Cheers.